Network Entertainment.
You're listening to the adoboTalks podcast, The Business of Creativity, a series of high-level inspirational and educational sessions on how creativity unleashes inventive solutions that fuel the economy. In each episode, we'll be learning essential lessons through conversations with some of the brightest minds in the creative industries. I'm Angel Guerrero, founder, president, and editor-in-chief of Adobo Magazine. And today, I'm chatting with one of the people behind the magic of our podcast, Vic Icasas. Vic is president and managing partner of Hit Productions, the most awarded sound production studio in the Philippines. Under Vic's leadership, Hit Productions has won multiple Cannes Gold Lions, a gold from the London International Ad Awards, and a bronze Clio for radio, and has been named Audio Production House of the Year by the 4As of the Philippines, a staggering 20 times. Thanks for joining us today, Vic. Hi, Vic. Well, welcome to the adoboTalks podcast.
Hello, Angel. Thank you for having me.
No, and thank you for really hosting us in a way where
Our pleasure.
We opted to partner with Hit Productions for our inaugural, pilots of the adoboTalks podcast.
We've been working together a long time.
Yes, I have to say, Vic and I have been working together a long time. And in fact, when Adobo Magazine had our first edition and our second edition, one of our first advertisers, by the way, was Hit Productions. Yep. So thank you for all your support.
Of course.
And I'm really, really pleased that you could join us today. About those awards I just mentioned, Hit Productions won the Philippines' first ever Cannes Gold Line for Traffic Therapy. It's a radio ad from Lotus Spa, and it was, I think, JWT.
Yes.
And could you tell us, what was it like behind the scenes on a piece of Philippine advertising history? And did you really feel that this ad had a shot at winning?
So, Traffic Therapy for Lotus Spa was quite some time ago.
Yes, it was. What year was that?
Gosh, I can't even remember now. But it was with the late, great Dave Ferrer.
Yes.
Right, yeah. Rest in peace, Dave. And it was an amazing concept. And of course, we did our best to help execute that concept for JWT. But if you ask me if I had any inkling, that it would win, at the time, the Philippines was still so unused to being on the international stage for awards that, we were just like, yeah, let's submit. Let's see what happens. And when it came back as a gold, the first ever gold for the Philippines, we were like just so jubilant. It legitimately unleashed, I think, it opened the floodgates for all the awards that came after it. Because from then on, there was success for many other agencies at Cannes Lions.
Yeah, I think when you win a gold, which is a hard one to win in Cannes, and if you go to Cannes, only the gold and the Grand Prix go up on stage. Even the silver and bronzes don't make it. Yeah. And radio is a tough category, especially at that time where there were a lot of campaigns in the world that were doing brilliantly in radio. Yeah. So I have to say congratulations on that. And I was in Cannes when that happened. I documented the first awarded Cannes Gold Line, and you're right, it triggered the industry. Yeah. It definitely showed that, hey, if we won gold, we can win again. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a great sign, and it's great that you're a part of it, and Hit was a part of it. Now, when we last talked, you mentioned how the history of Hit Productions is also, sort of synonymous to the history of technology and radio and advertising,
very true,
as a radio medium. So tell us how you started. I know you've been in this business. What got you into audio?
I've been with Hit since 1993, which would make this I'm bad at math. Let's just say I've been in the business for over 30 years, much more than 30 years, because I was actually doing ads when I was in high school. Graduated from college, I took 1 week off, and then I started at Hit.
Can you imagine that?
I'm still on my first job.
Oh my God. He's on his first job.
Yep.
30 years
30
on.
something years later.
And now he's president, of course. You came in as
I came in as a composer.
Right.
So I was a keyboard player. I still am a keyboard player. It's been a while. But I was a composer. I was composing scores and jingles for advertising. And back when I would submit, this is the tech part, back when I would submit for radio, I would be submitting cassettes, right? And then, over time, we would submit CDs. We kind of like evolved a bit. And now clients are asking for MP3s and so on and so forth. But the other reason why I sometimes call HIT a tech company is because we have to adapt to the platforms on which the advertising is being released. So back in the day when I started, back in the early 90s, it was super simple. You had TV and radio. That's it, right? Now you have TV and radio, but you also have Spotify, you have TikTok, you have influencers, you have digital, you have YouTube, you name it. There are so many platforms and so many formats. When I started, we were releasing ads on not even stereo. It was dual mono. That's what the stations were asking for. So it wasn't even left and right. It was just 1 and 2. And then it became stereo, and then it became 5.1, and now we have Dolby Atmos, right? So really part of our evolution as a company, the creativity was always there, but it was adapting to what the industry needed.
So it's when the audience touch points changed,
Yes.
and what they listened to changed,
Yes.
you had to adapt accordingly. And how difficult was it to adapt? I mean, I think the speed then of technology and adoption was sort of reasonable versus the past few years, correct? Yeah.
To put it bluntly, it's adapt or die.
True. True. And has the journey been fulfilling for you? I mean, you're where you want to be.
Super fulfilling. In some ways, I'm motivated every time there's a change because it's a challenge to see if, yet again, we can adapt and evolve. And, it's something we'll probably talk about later, but we're on the cusp of something new again with AI.
Yeah, so that's my next question.
Okay.
I mean, that's the buzzword these days. And we know that AI will impact creativity
Sure.
and the creative process. But the question is, how much will it affect us? And how can we use it? Or is it they will take over what we do? So I'd like you to share your thoughts on how Hit Productions is using AI, and if you are. And I know it will affect what you do because you can digitize voice.
Yes.
And you can replicate voice.
Yes.
And sound and music in a way that you might not need people anymore or a team of people. So tell us how HIT is using or adapting to AI.
We have a task force, mostly made up of the younger people in the company. And I gave them a challenge across every department, including finance, including sales. How do you think AI will affect your business unit, right? And we've had several meetings, the most recent of which was last week. The first thing I want to say is that the speed at which the technology changes and develops from one meeting to the next, because we only have quarterly meetings, right? From one quarter to the next, the first time we ever met, it was scary stuff. And I was like, okay, I think I can get my head around this. I think we know what to do. The next time we met, it's like, this is not what you showed me last time. This is like much more convincing, and for older people like me, much scarier. But when I say older people like me, I think that's key, because for younger people, especially those graduating, coming out of film school, coming out of media production school, it's not scary, it's exciting. It's a tool, it's something that can be used, and that's all it is for them. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's something to be embraced. So I think that's the kind of spirit we need to channel. In the task force that I put together, we're involving external stakeholders as well. So we've hired a top-notch intellectual property law firm to guide us on the legal aspects. We've involved, for instance, the voice talent sector, the Vocal Alliance, which is the local guild.
Vocal Alliance.
Vocal Alliance,
okay.
yes. We're actively involving them in our discussions because we want them to know that we're handling this in an ethical way. We've engaged some other people as guests. For instance, I know you know AJ De Marukot, right?
Yeah.
So from the visual side of the industry, I asked him to share some key learnings with my staff, right? And it's interesting to see how some of the parallels in creative work for hire are the same across audio and video when it comes to AI. So yeah, it all comes down, I think, to responsible use of the tools, consent, and compensation as far as the use of human voice is concerned. It's still early going. We're also talking to some clients, to some agencies. But I think the fact that we're involving the right people at every step is what will guide us in the right direction.
So you think creativity will be enhanced with AI as a tool?
No doubt. So one parallel I use with my own team, when I first started in the industry, everybody was using live instruments, live strings, live guitars, live drums. And then sampling came along, sample libraries came along, plugins came along, where you didn't need to hire a drummer. You could just, plug in this piece of software that would generate your drum track for you. Did that necessarily cause drummers to go extinct? No, right? It's just another tool. Maybe string sections don't get as much work as they used to because it is quite difficult to bring in a string section.
Yeah.
But orchestra still exists. People still listen to live music, right? So I have a feeling that AI will go down that path where it will just become another way of expressing creativity. So one last example I'll give is, for instance, photography, right? The end result, the picture. Film cameras definitely are no longer around. Digital cameras kind of like fell by the wayside, the DSLRs or whatnot. But at this point in history, this is the most number of photos the world is ever taking because of things like Instagram, things like, sharing videos from your phone, sharing pictures from your phone. Photography is huge right now. It doesn't matter what the underlying tech is. Photography is a form of expression. Right? So that's how I think AI will slot in.
So don't you miss, though, the live drums and the guitars?
We still do it. We still record live strings here in another room. Yeah, it's human touch.
Human touch is still important. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Now, given how accessible tools are now, I mean, anyone can produce music.
Yep.
In terms of audio production. These days you have a computer.
Yeah.
You mentioned, before when we talked, GarageBand is there. Yep. How does HIT stay above the competition? And what's the secret to your many years of award-winning work?
Okay.
It's fast and the tools are there. Young people are creating their own music. How do you compete?
So let me answer that from two aspects. One would be a technical aspect.
Okay.
The business that we're in is much more than just a laptop and a microphone. It is, 30 years worth of sound effects that we've created. It is a database of all the voice talents in the Philippines. It's there's a lot of other aspects to running a business like this that don't just come with the equipment. But more important...
Yeah, you're right. It's not just the equipment.
No.
Yeah,
more important, though, than the equipment would be the fact that we've identified something about our culture in HIT, and it's that we're problem solvers. If you throw a deadline at us, if you throw a particularly challenging storyboard at us, if you throw an impossible task at us, we'll figure out a way to get it done, right? And that is not even creativity anymore. That is not even equipment anymore. That's just sort of like an ethos and a culture.
Yeah, I remember working with you, Vic, during I was covering Cannes, and we had 360 cameras were in at that time, and I said, hey, we're going to do a 360 video of Cannes, the coverage of Cannes Lions in France. And I said, could you do 360 audio? And no one in the film has ever done 360 audio, and you were able to do it.
Yep.
So to your point about finding solutions to a problem, you were able to do it because technology and you're being aware. I think you're pretty much a geek, I think.
Yes, I am.
Every time I meet you, tell me
geek flag.
what's the newest gadget that's out there. So it is about that, right? You mentioned Atmos, Dolby Atmos, right? I'm just going back to the technology thing. Is that now the standard for audio sound? I know HIT Productions has, you're certified already as Dolby Atmos. And I see that when I watch movies, Dolby Atmos. What is that? I know in the before, what was it before? What was the minimum benchmark before?
Well, after stereo, there was something like 5.1.
Yeah, 5.1.
Dolby 5.1, right? And then now Dolby Atmos.
Okay. Do explain what that is.
Sure. So it's yet another example of how the market dictates where we go. we service not just advertising now, but other clients like Netflix and Disney. We'll talk about that later. And one of Netflix's asks from us was that we be Atmos certified because they release much of their content now in Atmos. If you look at Apple, they sell products like AirPods and the AirPods Max, their Macs, their iPads. They're all Atmos enabled, right? It's an ecosystem. And while it isn't necessarily mainstream just yet, it probably will be with muscle like Netflix and Apple behind it. So we're trying to take a calculated risk that that's the way everything's going to go, not just content, but maybe even advertising.
I think it's a good thing to understand, at least from an audio production point of view, that it matters that you are of a world standard, that you adapt to streaming platforms and global partners, and make sure that the Philippine production is of the same standard. So well done that you got the certification, and I've seen the studio. Impressive stuff. So if you guys want to visit it, it's really quite an amazing studio. Now let's talk about people you hire, like musicians. You hire musicians and people have a good ear, right?
Yes.
Correct. When you hire people for hit productions. But I remember you did say something about they have to know how to service clients.
Yeah.
Why is it so important? I mean, people who compose music may not be, good at servicing clients or business.
I guess it has to do with that problem-solving ethos that I mentioned, where I've interviewed in the course of the last few decades some really, really talented composers and musicians. And within the first minute or so, I can tell that while they may be musical geniuses, they're not cut out for advertising. Because part of the onboarding process in the music department is I tell them to give 100% when they compose what they're composing. And then when they hit send on that email, you have to let it go. Because chances are 10 people sitting in a conference room are going to rip it to shreds because they're trying to predict what the CEO is going to want to hear or whatever. It's a difficult thing for someone that is so creative and so invested in the work to have it ripped to shreds, right, by the client. And that's not just music. That's writing, as I'm sure you know. That's storyboarding, directing. It's a tough ask to be a creative in an industry that is
It's
also a business.
service-oriented.
It's service-oriented
Yes,
business.
yes.
And some people are cut out for it, some are not.
So you've been able to find people who are
Sure.
doing both.
Yes.
Excellent. Let's talk about some of the different projects you've done over the years. I mean, I'm sure Hit has done quite a lot. I mean, I look at your trophy shelf. I mean, it's quite impressive. And I understand that your team took on the task of doing an ad
Yes.
where you had 3 whole minutes of all car sound effects.
Yes.
And absolutely no dialogue.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Tell us about that ad. Ken.
So, yes, the brief for that one was they wanted to do an ad with no dialogue and nothing else except car sound effects, but arranged in a musical way. And they did not tell me initially how long the ad was going to be. I thought it was going to be like a 6-seconder or a 15-seconder. When they told me it was going to be 3 minutes long, and that the director of the ad was basically going to build his storyboard around whatever we came up with, it blew my mind. It was so intimidating. It's like, how are we going to make it interesting for 3 minutes? So it was an ad for Shell. And the director was Lyle. Lyle trusts us with a lot of these kind of off-the-wall ads, right? And it came out, really well. I'm sure I can give you.
We'll have a snippet of that when we produce and air this podcast, so you can hear what it's like to do audio that's just car sounds.
Yep.
So you use real cars.
It was a mix of car sounds from our library, car sounds that we recorded before, and car sounds that we recorded just for this. So I will shamelessly say that my own car featured prominently. I recorded quite a bit of sounds for that as well. So
I mean, of course, audio is normally considered in post-production,
yes.
Right? I'm just going to ask, is this ideal when audio is thought of at the beginning of the process? Or, I know in the industry, they tend to give you the job after the shoot is done and
yes.
the storyboard's done. And then they say, hey, put some audio behind this. So, what is preferred? What's the ideal?
There's no real ideal in the sense that what you've described is the norm. Mm-hmm. But for something where they come to us with audio as the first step, it's rare and we welcome it because it really means that the focus of starting with audio means that they recognize the importance of the audio, right? Because sometimes in a very effective ad, the audio works so well that you don't notice it's happening.
True.
It's just wallpaper,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
But without it, you'll notice immediately that something's wrong.
Okay. Now, what makes a great client for you? You know, dream client to work with. You know, in the realm of audio production.
Sure.
And tell me, you have examples of some clients you like working with?
Definitely, the clients that we appreciate are those that communicate well, because the act of translating what they want to something we give back to them, there's so much that can be lost if the communication process breaks down, right? So ideally, it's someone that's knowledgeable and can communicate well. But at the same time, even if they're experts or knowledgeable, they trust us. You know, they defer to us that we're the subject matter experts on audio, and we will give them, what they're asking for.
Yeah. So clients for you are direct clients, I guess, brands.
Yes.
Ad
Agencies,
agencies. Okay.
Yes, and platforms nowadays.
Okay.
So we, like I said, we work with Spotify, TikTok, Netflix, Disney. You know, it's a whole new world now.
It is, isn't it? I mean, in the past, you'd maybe work with a radio station, an ad agency, a couple clients, and now it's anyone who's doing content.
Yes,
right?
for sure.
Do you do film? I mean,
we do have a small video production department, but what we are experimenting with is the idea of hit productions as, like you said, a content company, a problem-solving company, much more than maybe an audio production company. The word audio or sound does not actually appear in our name, so that's a good
hit production.
bit of flexibility for the future.
Yeah, I guess when you do content, sometimes you have to put it all in, you know.
The reality is, if you look at what's out there now on TikTok, on YouTube, you know, people are content creators, walking, talking content creators. The script, the visuals, the dance moves, you know, the
How is
song.
that affecting your business, though?
Which
is more structured, you know, less impulse, you know.
It's affected it, I would say, from the point of now brands are more conscious about authenticity. Because whereas we had the glossy ads of before, they come across now as possibly even inauthentic. Because when you see what's on platforms nowadays, it's really just people in their bedrooms or garage.
Yeah.
Very authentic, right? So there's a conscious decision for the content to not
reflect
be too...
that. Yeah, not to be too polished.
Yeah, not to be too polished.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, I'd like to talk about, you know, the work that HIT does for localization.
Sure.
Your team has worked on Filipino dubs of international releases. So, guys, if you've watched Stranger Things for Netflix, the Songs of Encanto for Disney,
Yes.
this was done by
Yes.
HIT Productions. So, what have you learned from working with these major clients, these major films? What pride do you take as well? I mean, it's quite an achievement.
The biggest eye-opener, the biggest aha moment for us was how different Philippine production practices are from the way things are done abroad. They are very specific about even what microphones we need to be using, what the noise floor or, you know, the noise level of the studio has to be. There is literally such a thing as a world standard that we had to build around. And our biggest learning was, if we want to play on a big stage, we have to play by the big stage rules.
So you just learned as the job came that you had to have these, the checklists that you...
Right.
So there's a long list of what you need
Equipment, practices, file naming. You know, you can only name the file a certain way, otherwise it gets rejected. In a way, the Philippine style of production is a bit more, you know, loosely put together and more output oriented. But with the global clients, every step of the way has to be to a certain standard.
So, you know, you're already sort of ahead of the curve locally, and you've dealt with international clients working with Disney on Filipino dubbing, and you should hear it, guys. It's really quite exceptional. And it's real people, right? Real Filipinos
Yes.
writing. And I remember you said that every dub, it has to match syllable by syllable as well as the movement of the mouth,
So
right?
specifically, Disney has a rule where if you translate one of their songs, if the line of the melody has 7 syllables, the Filipino version has to have 7 syllables. So
That's tough.
otherwise you're changing the melody, right? So it becomes like a word puzzle in a way. You can't add, you can't subtract. So I have to find something that's 7 syllables that matches this line in Filipino or Tagalog. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
So it's a talent. I mean, that's
It
what the
is a
localization.
talent, and you've achieved that
Yeah.
across several films.
Super
right?
talented translators.
Fantastic. Now, based with on your experience with these international clients, do you think the local audio industry should prioritize growing in that segment? I mean, is there potential for our business, our industry, to do dubbing from English to Filipino?
So when it comes to advertising, when it comes to entertainment, I think for our industry to really open up to the rest of the world, it has to adhere to those standards. Because if Amazon, Netflix, Disney, they come to the Philippines, they want to produce local content. They expect a certain level of quality in the production, which sometimes we can hit, sometimes we can't. The best way to ensure that more money comes in, invested in production, is to make sure we hit those standards.
So I think all the audio production should look into that if they want to grow in that area.
Even video production.
Even
film.
video. So do you think the TV networks are doing that right now?
The TV networks have the benefit of being able to access what practices and standards are like in other countries. But there are production houses, film or audio, who may not have had the benefit of exposure to those, to those workflows, right? So
there's hope.
There's
right?
hope, for sure.
You've shown the way. So
it's I wouldn't even say that we've shown the way. I think right now, if anybody just does research, for instance, Netflix's knowledge base is publicly accessible, even to non-vendors. You can just jump on their knowledge base and learn so much by browsing. So amazing.
Yeah, everything's out there. The information.
Everything
You
is
just
out there.
have to do your homework and
Yeah.
see what you're up against, and then try to work towards achieving what you want to achieve. So now, in our conversation, you mentioned that the art of sound design is all about recreating reality. What did you mean by that?
Well, okay. So reality was one example of how sound design can be used, but the beauty of it, and it ties back to the radio ads we've done for awards, for instance. The beauty of sound design is you don't have the limitations that film productions do. In a sound environment, you can create anything you want, right? And it just so happens that in many of the projects we do, one of our tasks is to be given a film that was shot on a set, and we have to recreate every single element that happened on that set. Because if the client wants to hear a little bit more of the chair squeaking, or the frying pan on the stove, we need to be able to control those elements without affecting like the background sound, or which would happen if you were manipulating sound from the set, right? But that's reality in a very specific sense. You could also create fantastical things like, a million chickens running around an island, or, with audio, with an audio world, anything's possible, right? And
how does the sound of reality in the Philippines, for example,
differ
from other markets? You mentioned that there are sounds in the Philippines that is uniquely Filipino.
That would be a great exercise to kind of like record ambient sound from different countries and see if people could identify it just from no language-based clues, just like sounds and environmental things. So with us, there would probably be like tricycles, but then that might be a tuk-tuk, right? Or that would be an interesting challenge. There are very uniquely Filipino things. The annoying jeepney horn that I'm not going to even try to replicate with my own voice. We have a library that we've built up over the years of uniquely Filipino sounds, because most of the publicly available sound effects libraries are American, right? And you're not going to get those sounds from an American library.
Fantastic. Yeah. I can imagine like opening a balut, slurping a balut. That's Filipino sound.
So, the other thing about sound design is that it doesn't have to be literal. So for instance, we have a library of fight sounds, and they are not sound effects of people punching things. They are vegetables breaking, or like hitting a coconut with a machete is actually hitting someone's head with a knife, or whatever. Squishing watermelon is blood and guts. Whatever you see is not necessarily the
Literal,
sound
yeah,
literally
of
the
the
actual
actual
thing.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've mastered that along the way.
Yeah, trial and error. Yeah.
Okay. In the Philippines, what's unique about like ads, like in advertising, in audio,
Yeah.
right? I know it's of course music,
Yes.
it's voicing.
Yes.
You mentioned that when we talked earlier
Mm-hmm.
that we're a jingle centric
We are
market.
super jingle centric.
Tell us about that.
It's not a coincidence that every hotel band and cruise ship band in the world is Filipino. I mean, we are a musical country, right? And we are really good mimics, but we are also, really soulful singers, really passionate about karaoke, right? So I've heard my own, people at home or my gardener or walking down the street, I've heard people singing unironically jingles that we've done, and they're singing it for the enjoyment of doing it. It's not because they want to promote the product, right? They just appreciate a good melody. In the US, jingles are seen as kind of corny. They would rather just license an actual song than compose a jingle. But here, we're all about the jingles. Yeah.
I mean, that's fun. So even to this day, I mean,
Oh, yeah,
20
for sure.
years ago, 30 years, it was still jingle
Yes,
centric.
up to now.
Up to now.
Yeah.
Isn't that lovely to hear? Filipinos love singing.
Yeah.
Brands love using jingles.
Yep.
And now they even include dance moves to go with the
Yes.
jingle. So I've seen a lot of those ads where they
For sure.
combine jingles. And so when you create a jingle, what team is involved in that? I'm just curious.
Sure.
You have
So in the old days, the lyrics used to be coming from the agency, but now we either work hand in hand with the agency, or sometimes they will ask us to come up with the lyrics ourselves.
Oh, I see.
They'll just brief us about the character of the brand or what the client's hoping to accomplish. So not only do we compose the jingle in-house musically, but we even come up with what you could consider the copy, right? So it's one way the business has evolved.
So how do you think Filipinos can grow creatively and penetrate the global stage in audio production? What are the skills or technology? I mean, we've talked about tech, but what skills do you think we need? That we always say that Filipinos at the cusp of.
Yep.
We know ourselves that it's one of the most creative people in the world. We sing, we dance. It's innate to us. It's natural. But how can we grow creatively and make it a business and rise above in a bigger way? We have different stars, a few,
Yep.
and we still talk about the same stars from 20 years ago.
Yep.
How can we break the stage, you think, from your point of view?
I think one of the biggest untapped skills that we need to lean into is communication, because when you deal with a client from outside, a lot of times I've heard comments like, "Oh, it's so much easier working with you guys because I feel like I'm working with someone from down the street," right? It's putting the foreign clients, in a mindset that I'm really dealing with a partner and not just someone in the third world, right? And I think if we can elevate our thinking to always think of us as partners rather than just vendors or suppliers, that'll
true.
go a long way towards being really seen as equals on the global stage.
How about musicality? I mean, our music. I mean, a lot of people say we do know how to, what's the word? Mimic
Yes.
songs, but we don't tend to create our own. How do you think that will change?
So it's also interesting. One of the things I observed over the years is that Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music have all given us our own personal radio stations in a way where we don't have to listen to what other people are listening to. We can listen to our very own curated playlist of what I care about, right? And what you listen to and what I listen to are two wildly different things, maybe. Whereas back in the day, everybody had to listen to the same thing on the radio, right? So I think the opportunity here is that many people no longer need to mimic. They can come up with their own personal style, and there will be an audience somewhere in the world for it, because that's
So we just have to keep at it, guys.
Yeah,
keep
that's-
singing, put it out
that's
there.
just the way consumption works nowadays. I mean, you'll find an audience for your 6 minutes of me tapping on a cup while there's like a musical drone or whatever, some really obscure thing. Someone out there is into it.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, Vic.
Yeah.
And here's to the creative economy that truly uplifts us all. Now, I have a bonus question.
Sure.
What song do you listen to these days? What kind of music do you listen to?
In what context?
Well, now, like it's Spotify. What's your
Okay.
list like?
So when I listen to music, it's mostly when I like to run, as you know, and running is definitely where I bond with music the most. It really, inspires me to push to the finish line. You may find it interesting when I listen to music for creative purposes, like I need to work or I need to focus on my laptop. I will put on like the most saccharine, generic meditation type yoga, whatever music as my background. If it's not there, I won't be able to work. But if it is there, I won't notice it, but I'll work.
I see. So it focuses.
Yeah, it helps put my mind in the right place.
Right.
And that really is what music is all about. It doesn't need to be about lyrics that will distract me or anything. It's just putting my mind in.
So are you still playing your keyboard or guitar or anything?
It's been a while.
Oh my God.
I'm getting better at Excel now, though.
Excel?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
the spreadsheet. Yeah.
That's nuts. Well, I hope you bring music back into your life and in terms of
It
playing
never left.
and we love to hear live bands, and I know
course.
that HIT does have bands coming here to play, DJs. So
Live bands are, I predict, going to have a resurgence when AI comes along because people will crave live
that.
stuff. Yeah.
well, on that note,
Yeah.
thank you very much,
Thank you,
Vic.
Angel.
And cheers to you.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to and watching this episode of the adoboTalks podcast with our very special guest, Vic Icasas of Hit Productions. The adoboTalks podcast, the business of creativity, is produced by Adobo Magazine, the word on creativity, in partnership with the Pod Network and recorded in partnership with Hit Productions. Tune in next week for another insightful conversation with one of the brightest minds in our creative industries.
The opinions of podcast creators, hosts, and guests are not necessarily reflective of the official stance of the Pod Network Entertainment, its hosts, or other network programs. The content created by the people behind the podcast is personal and not meant to harm any religion, ethnicity, group, organization, company, or individual.